Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Friday morning to you all. I hope you guys are doing awesome out there this morning and having a wonderful start to your day. And I hope everyone's had an awesome week out there so far. As it's coming to an end, we're about to head off into our weekend. We got some weather to talk about. The first thing we'll cover is current conditions, the latest outlooks, things like that. And then we'll break down the country section by section. As always, we'll zoom into a couple individual areas and states that run the higher risk of severe weather. We will focus on those areas first and then break down the country kind of region by region. So take advantage of those timestamps. After we get done doing that, we'll discuss the pattern coming up over the weekend, early next week, and then we'll give you an update on the tropics. So if you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. And if anybody has anything that I can pray about or pray over, please put it in the comments below. And definitely stay tuned for the end of the video if you're interested in a Bible devotion. We would love to have you as we get in Scripture. So let's get rocking and rolling this morning. So this is the latest conditions. We got a big slug of rain moving now northeast of the Great Lakes region, but we're still dealing with some rain across the UP of Michigan, areas of lower Michigan. We got areas of rain also surging across kind of the middle of the country, a little bit of rainstorm activity in Oklahoma, southwestern sections of the state, northern areas of the state, a little bit of rain in Missouri, a little bit of moisture just off the Gulf coastline, a little bit of moisture off the coastline of western Florida, a little bit of flow up here in the northern Rockies. Nothing too crazy going on as far as like any flash flood warnings, severe thunderstorm warnings or watches or anything like that. So all in all, nothing too wild ongoing to kickstart your Friday morning. But watches, warnings, and advisories. We do have heat advisories across these areas in the orange counties. So it continues to be pretty hot out there, but not as widespread as we saw earlier this week. We continue to have some heat advisories across southeast VA, eastern areas of North Carolina. Some flood watches are up for areas of Virginia, West Virginia, and western Maryland. We continue to have those flood watches up for areas of Texas and New Mexico. We got some red flag warnings up across like Wyoming. And what is that? That's what I thought. Okay, so we got some extreme heat warnings across Arizona. So the heat is about to pick up in intensity. You got what's already very high surface temperatures, but you got a little bit of a push of moisture now moving into the area. So I guess you would say a little bit of humidity to go with with what's already very hot temperatures. So you don't get a whole lot of humidity out there in the southwest, but when you do and you mix it with what's already very hot temperatures, it can definitely be pretty miserable out there. There's always a battle between the south, the southeast, type heat and the desert type heat. I could take sides to both. Honestly, I've never experienced desert heat before, but I would say that 120 degrees is 120 degrees. I mean, that's pretty hot. Some people say, 100 degrees with dew points in the 70s is much worse than 125 degrees in very hot air. But I would argue that it's all very hot in its own. So enough of all that. Let's continue to roll here. So watches, warnings, and advisories as far as the Storm Prediction Center outlook. We continue to have a large kind of weird looking marginal risk going across areas of the southeast, up the spine, and pretty much all the Appalachian Mountains, all the way into the Ohio Valley. But we do have a secondary higher risk of severe weather, a slight risk up for areas of southeast, lower Michigan. This does include Detroit. We'll talk about that area. But a very large slight risk across areas of the Dakotas into Nebraska, including western areas of Minnesota. We'll talk about this area too here in a second. Large area of the country does run at least a risk of thunderstorms, but not a super high risk in the light green of severe weather. But what's driving this slight risk? There is a 5% risk of a tornado within 25 miles in a given location. And this brown area, Bismarck, Pierre, you guys are included into this. 2% risk of a tornado in the orange. In orange. I don't know where I'm getting that from. In the green areas here. Sometimes my brain just gets ahead of my mouth. You guys know that. But 5% risk in the brown, 2% risk in the green. Now, what's really driving this is the wind and hail threat, honestly. The yellow area, that is a 15% risk of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour within 25 miles in a given location. And then I click on this area, the black outline region with the black dashes going in between. That is a 10% risk of significant size tail. So I'll zoom in a little bit more to some of these areas here, kind of move south, then back north here. Now, it's definitely, I'm going to get too far ahead of myself, but it's definitely a tricky situation here in the northern plains. But the hail threat, kind of the same deal. You got a 15% risk in the yellow of hail exceeding 1 inch in diameter or larger. 1 inch in diameter or larger. The black outline region is that 10% risk of significant size tail, 2 inch in diameter or larger. So these storms, where they do form, and I'm saying that for a reason, can produce all hazards, honestly. So definitely a big hail maker, big wind maker with these storms today. Now let's go on and move over here to this area. Remember, we have the slight risk up for this region here. We'll kind of zoom into it right there. Detroit right in the middle of this. Tornado threat, sub 2%, but you never know. The wind threat, though, is really what's driving this slight risk for this area for today. We have a 15% risk of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour with some of these storms. So be aware of that. Flint, Detroit, Ann Arbor, and down to just north of Toledo includes some many other areas that you see here in the yellow. Sarnia, is that how you pronounce? I don't think I've ever tried that town name before, but anyways, just be aware. And some of these outlooks could tweak a little bit, could change. The risk of flash flooding, the only area I would really pinpoint here is areas of the apps here, but extending into the hills and mountains of PA, just east of Pittsburgh. But the yellow areas, that is a 15% risk of flash flooding to occur within 25 miles on any given location. So just be aware of this region right here in the yellow. Could definitely get some flash flooding here with just all the rain that's already fell and some of these storms kind of grouping up together. So let's highlight Michigan here for a second. We'll start off around 2 p.m. So for my folks tuning in from lower Michigan, time frames up here. I know it just almost cuts off the far extreme southern areas here, but I want to keep the timestamp in this and most of the state in this also, except the UP obviously. But around 2 p.m. we get to 3, 4. We could begin to get some nasty storms developing in central lower Michigan. You see them here. Storms kind of forming kind of between Mount Pleasant and Lansing. But remember, model guidance isn't always going to nail this. We take it to 5, 6, Saginaw, Flint, down to Jackson, Lansing. You see these intense cells. Not everybody will get rain. Some people might not even get a drop of rain out of this setup. But whoever gets a storm, it could be quite intense. But 7 p.m. storms from the Ohio-Indiana border all the way up through southeast Michigan. So this is around 7 p.m. Flint getting hit hard here. And these storms will kind of be like multicellular, if you will, clusters. Maybe they'll, develop a line here, but looks really broken up. But 8 p.m., storms getting close to Detroit. 9 p.m., 10 p.m., once you get to about midnight, these are about done, but they could pack a punch when they form. So it looks like the time frame really is they start to get going around 3 to 4, could last all the way through about 11, midnight. But if you look at the wind gusts with this, wherever these storms do form, of course, this is just one model run, but wherever they do form, you see these little pockets of highlighted colors here, here. That's where we could get winds. If you look down here at the key, I know it's kind of small, 50, 55, 60, and this little storm right here wants to pump out almost 65, 65, 70 mile per hour winds. So I don't know if we're going to get that high. Sometimes it's overdone, but these storms will be packing some strong wind gusts. So just be aware of that and keep in mind of the weather here in lower Michigan today. Now, let's break down the severe weather threat to the west across the plains. Let's talk about North Dakota first. Model guidance really likes North Dakota with this setup. That does include the Dakotas down in Nebraska and areas of Minnesota as far as the slight risk area. So we'll start off around 5 p.m. Time frame is up here. Looks like it's cutting it off just a little bit. There you go. Little storm tries to form there in western North Dakota. Minot, big storms forming right around your area around dinner time tonight. So 7 p.m. This is 8 p.m. This is 9 p.m. You notice these little squiggly circle lines coming off some of these cells. This indicates, as I always say, more intense updrafts, stronger storms. These, when you start to see this on your screen, This means that these storms are likely, if they're forming the way the model is showing, producing very large hail, strong winds, and the potential for a tornado. Remember, we have that 5% risk. Where do these storms form? That's the big question. This model likes right in this area, right in the middle of North Dakota. They could very well form down here around Bismarck, Jamestown, Dickinson, maybe down to South Dakota. But these look to be some pretty intense storms. I mean, we get to 9 to 10 p.m. This is 11. Storms start to get closer to Jamestown, kind of the Dickinson, Bismarck, Jamestown over to West Fargo area. And then they kind of develop into what we call an MCS, almost a mesoscale convective system. Damaging wind threat will persist, large hail threat, tornado threat. And this is midnight. These storms start to really bow out, impact all of eastern, especially southeastern North Dakota. And Fargo gets hit very hard. And we get into after midnight, could have some lingering showers and storms. So if we back this up, just note that these clusters of what look to be supercells, semi-discrete supercells at least, could develop down here. They might not develop up here, but yeah. So here's the thing with South Dakota. We'll start off around late morning. There ain't a whole lot developing. We get 3, 4, 5, 6. We got some action a little bit here in western South Dakota. We get to 8 p.m. It shows a pretty intense thunderstorm south up here. But all in all, 8 p.m., right when the action's going crazy here in North Dakota, South Dakota, this particular model run ain't showing much. But model guidance is probably going to struggle with the initiation of these storms. And, we start to bring it into 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m., midnight. Guys, I'll be honest, there ain't a whole lot to show off this model run. So there is a chance, even though a large section of South Dakota has a risk of significant severe weather, might not get much today. Some areas might, 85, 90% of the state of South Dakota might not even get a drop of rain. There's the potential for that. And I would say Nebraska is not a whole lot different. Start off around midday, 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m. Some storms, out and about across western to central areas of Nebraska. But all in all, it doesn't show anything too crazy. But once again, I'll reiterate this. These storms could be more intense than what model guidance is showing. It could be more widespread, I want to add. So, 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11, midnight. Doesn't show a whole lot, but you remember the highest severe weather threat is for the northern areas of Nebraska. Goodness, that is a big county. That is a random, huge county in Nebraska. You'll have to tell me which county this is here without me looking it up on the fly. But anyways, Minnesota, starting off around 8 p.m. So, we're on through the day and afternoon, evening. Not a whole lot going on, but the western areas of the state need to definitely be aware of what's coming out of North or South Dakota. So we start to take it to about 1 a.m., 2 a.m. If you live in sort of the western areas of Minnesota, really close to the I would say the North Dakota-Minnesota border, could have a nasty line of storms just after midnight. These could pack a punch, and it almost rides down the interstate from Fargo down to St. Cloud, 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m. Shows St. Cloud getting hit by a pretty strong to severe line of storms around 5 a.m. tomorrow morning. And eventually this does get all the way to Minneapolis. As we're waking up tomorrow morning, could really wake you guys up along that corridor from Fargo down to Minneapolis from midnight to about daybreak tomorrow. And eventually this could get all the way to Rochester. So we'll have to see how this area of storms sort of, behaves and sort of rides the upper portion of this ridge. So pretty wild stuff there. But, if you look at the updraft helicity swath here, this indicates where our most intense storms could potentially be. And, of course, to no surprise, it shows it in North Dakota and to Minnesota. So it's only picking up what it can, which is what this model guidance is showing. But just be aware, wherever these storms form, very large hail could fall, very strong wind gusts. For example, if I pull up the estimated wind gust swath from the HER model here, it does pick up on very strong wind gusts with this area of storms, but It does show some strong winds with any storms that form in South Dakota and northern Nebraska too. So you remember when we were breaking down South Dakota, Nebraska, it didn't show much storm coverage, but the ones that are forming are producing some very strong wind gusts. I mean, 50, 60 mile per hour winds. So just be aware of that today in these areas. Now, Tropical Tidbits is still down. I feel bad for Levi. He runs that site, and I know it has to be killing him. You can definitely tell he's frustrated on social media. He keeps posting updates, but something is bugging out his system, and we all hope that he can get that going back going by peak hurricane season, because Tropical Tidbits is a free site, by the way, that all y'all listening in have access to. It takes some time to learn, but it is a remarkable, amazing source when I'm breaking down the tropics for anybody who does weather YouTube. So hopefully he gets that going here in the coming weeks and it stays good for him. But starting off this morning across the deep south, we get to about midday. Storms, normal summer type stuff in Florida gets going here. Just pop-up activity. Once again, I always say this in summer, it's impossible to figure out where these storms are going to get going, but a couple areas that I would say are favored, and that's one in the panhandle of Florida, southern sections of Alabama, a little bit more pop-up activity maybe in Georgia, South Carolina today. We had some nasty storms like in the Greenville-Spartanburg area, but we take it to about late afternoon, evening hours, storms just dancing around. All this is pulse in nature, outflow boundary driven. So, I always try to explain this briefly. Me, I'll get way off, way out in left field sometimes, but these storms will pop up. They'll do what we call pop-off outflow boundaries. If you don't follow me on X or Twitter, definitely even Facebook, hit me up there. I geek out with this in the summer. But these storms will explode even on a 10 to 20% chance of storm type day. Pop off what we call an outflow boundary, and these boundaries will pop off from these storms. It's rain-cooled air. That rain-cooled air, you can see it on radar, hits warmer air, and the difference between that cooler air and warmer air fires up more convection, so it's like a chain reaction, a domino effect almost, and that's really what's driving this pattern right now across the southeast. 2 days ago we had the sort of that weak upper low, if you will, shortwave, but that's kind of not really driving the pattern much anymore, so it's always tough to figure it out. But same thing, we'll move up the road a little bit here in the mid-Atlantic areas, the Ohio Valley, and we'll take it to about the afternoon hours, and that's why we have these flood watches up for eastern areas of West Virginia. It really fires up some thunderstorms in the higher elevations of West Virginia today, so if you're vacationing up here, be aware of that. Show some storms all the way to the mountains of Virginia, southeast Kentucky, North Carolina, eastern Tennessee. See some little bit of pop-up activity outside the mountains in the Carolinas, but it really likes the idea of a lot of storm activity in the central and southern Appalachian Mountains today. So if you're vacationing up there, heading to the mountains, it's probably going to be a stormy evening. There's a lot of widespread storm activity in eastern Tennessee, western North Carolina, and really just shows a lot of storm and heavy rain activity clustering up here where we do have that slight risk of excessive rainfall, and just normal sort of storm activity up there in Indiana. And we keep this going, and everything diminishes with the loss of daytime heating, typical summer type stuff. The Northeast today, we take it to about early at mid-afternoon. Some storms, some downpours could make their way across Lake Ontario into the Tug Hill Plateau, the Adirondacks. We begin to get into the evening hours. You see a big line of storms surging across southern Ontario. So I know I've had a couple people tuning in from this area. If you do live in southern Ontario today, be aware of a line of storms tonight that could sweep across this region. This eventually, whatever's left over of the energy, will try to get all the way into the northern areas of New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and just more widespread rain up here in Maine. But I really do think the severe weather threat with this will be dampened a bit, probably due to the fact that you're lacking what we call thermodynamics. Overall, it's a very comfortable day across the Northeast today. It's not going to be near as hot as we've seen over the last couple of days. Yesterday was even a big improvement. The south central U.S., we take it to about this afternoon, and a little bit of storm activity in New Mexico, a little bit of storm activity in southeast Texas. We see the storms trying to develop here in this area of Texas into central Oklahoma. So these showers could be very heavy. Storms could be produce a lot of heavy rainfall in New Mexico, but just be aware of that. Some storm activity here in Louisiana, pulse in nature. Mississippi, same thing. See the storms up there in southern Missouri also. Just enough little push in the atmosphere to get some storms going. These storms sort of form and just have erratic movement to it just due to these storms popping off. Like I said, those outflow boundaries. So right in the middle of the country, the Central Plains here. You see the storms developing in Missouri. I would watch out central, southern Missouri today. You know, Springfield, Joplin, over to Columbia. Was it Jefferson? I'm getting some names memorized out here. Could get some strong to severe storms in this area. Not a very high severe weather threat. But, you know, St. Louis, you guys could get some storms today. Really this afternoon. Little bit of storms here in eastern Colorado. New Mexico we've mentioned, and we've already talked about Nebraska. And then everything will diminish with the loss of daytime heating. And then the western U.S., haven't talked about Oregon, Washington lately, but it's just been quiet. But a little bit of shower activity in the extreme western areas of the Pacific Northwest. And we got enough flow here across Montana, so we're going to get some storm activity across those areas. I do think moisture will begin to increase across areas of the Southwest later this weekend. But a closer look at Montana here from my folks up in this region. Say hello to Karen and Montana. She's a loyal viewer. Hope she's doing well. But some storms will fire. You know, this is this afternoon around 3 p.m. We got some storms trying to develop some downpours across central Montana. And then these will drift more so west to east and tap into some energy once it gets into the Dakotas. But temperatures today, I mean, look at the Northeast. Yeah, everybody's jealous of you guys. You guys are just rocking and chilling up here in the 70s. You're definitely getting a break from the nasty heat wave earlier this week. But there is a wild temperature gradient into here. There's a bit of a trough in place, and I'm going to try to draw on here a little bit, but it's kind of right into here. Maybe not the best color, but there is definitely kind of a backdoor cold front keeping you guys cool, but us down here in the south pretty darn hot. So typical kind of summer type stuff. I mean, this is above average for a lot of areas, but not 10 degrees above average or anything like that. But we look at the central U.S., pocket of cooler air across the upper Midwest. I mean, it's comfortable in the UP. You guys are in the 60s. It must be nice to have highs in the 60s. We're getting at that time of the year here in the south where we can't even get lows in the 60s. But hot across the plains. Some areas in South Dakota might hit 100 degrees. So big time heat flexing there. And we look at the western U.S. and this is what it's looking like down here. I want to take a look at dew points real quick. Still pretty dry down here. But you can see as we start to get, well, we're way too far ahead. You can see as we start to get into next week, we start to get some dew points like getting into the 50s and 60s, which is pretty moist for Arizona. But anyways, continuing to move forward here, looking at tomorrow's severe weather threats. For Saturday, we do have a slight risk across these areas here in the upper Midwest and the plains. And we have a marginal risk, a bit of a severe weather threat tomorrow across New England and to the mid-Atlantic. But just taking a look at this slight risk area, Minneapolis included into this, down to Sioux Falls, all the way into areas in Nebraska, Brookings. Slight risk tornado threat. I mean, really it's confined outside the main severe weather threat for areas of Minnesota and Wisconsin. But we do look at the wind threat. We do have a 15% risk of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour in this area for tomorrow. And the hail threat, 15% risk of hail exceeding 1 inch in diameter or larger in this area. I want to look at something real quick, make sure I'm not missing nothing. No tornado threat with this marginal risk. Well, I wouldn't say no threat, but it's a low, very low, sub 2%. But looking at the excessive rainfall outlook, not much to speak on for tomorrow. It's a couple marginal risk. And then we go back to the Storm Prediction Center outlook and we look at day 3. And we do have another severe weather threat across the upper Midwest and the Great Lakes region, even a slight risk extending pretty far north up into Wisconsin, and then my friends in the UP all the way up to Marquette. So just a closer look in some of these areas. Sometimes I wish it didn't show so many towns on weather-wise. At the same time, it's awesome. It's just, can you guys see it? You know, that's a big thing here. I know my resolution is better than it was, say, last week with the upgrades with the new computer and monitor. But this is the slight risk area up here. I'll move it up here. So we'll broaden this out a little bit. And the tornado threat, not much of one for Sunday. Well, we're kind of everywhere. Go back to day 3. I forgot. Yeah, so for day 3, all we know is that there is a 15% risk of severe weather within 25 miles in any given location. I highly doubt this will be a 15% risk of a tornado, but there'll probably be a wind and a hail threat with this. So. And then the excessive rainfall outlook, just a pretty large area of the country at least has a risk of flash flooding. So looking at the pattern ahead, we'll start off for Sunday, which is the day 3 outlook we just showed you guys. Really what's driving the setup is a combination of things, but it's really, gets enhanced by, you see this area in blue right here. This is lower pressure. The areas in like orange and yellow, that's higher pressure. So when you see lower pressure come up on your map like this, that's energy in the atmosphere. So provides an enhanced area of flow and levels of the atmosphere, and this could ride over a moist air mass. And this time of the year, pretty moist air is rising pretty far north in latitude, so you get overlapping ingredients. But the thing is once you get to this time of the year across the south, you lack flow. You got plenty of thermodynamics, meaning you got plenty of moisture in the atmosphere. It's plenty hot enough, but you lack really enhanced flow. That shifts to the north because on average, your jet begins to shift to the north the more you get into summer. And then by the time you get into late summer, early fall, of course, the jet begins to sink back southward, so severe weather threats begin to sink a little bit further south, hence secondary severe weather season. Trying to explain it where you guys can understand. But anyways, this area in blue, that's kind of an upper trough, a short wave, lower pressure, whatever you want to call it, piece of energy in the atmosphere. Enhances things. This creates that bit of a severe weather threat across areas of the upper Midwest. And then we start to get into Monday. And right now for Monday, which is day 4, let me get this right, make sure I got it right. Yeah, day 4, there is no 15% risk up. They're monitoring this. But as we're getting into Monday evening, this lower pressure looks like it amplifies and gets stronger. So I do think we're probably going to get some severe weather chances, maybe across this area, as flow kind of digs down, and the response is dipping the jet stream and this lower pressure, the trough digging down. So maybe some severe weather chances, I don't know, somewhere across this region as we're getting into Monday. And then we begin to make our way into our Tuesday, first day of July, just rolling on through the year, right? And this trough kind of gets, extended here, but we get this big dip of the jet. I would just view it like this, like that digs down like this. So I could see some severe weather possibilities across areas of the Northeast as we are getting into the first day of July, which is our Tuesday. And this also is going to bring probably a decent cool down for the Northeast for next week. Even maybe cooler than what we're going to get today. And then the trough sort of amplifies and gets basically just impacts the pattern even more. And I do want to mention, you see these areas of lower pressure and across the southwest. This will really enhance moisture down here. But I want to watch this. This is getting into next Wednesday and Thursday, getting close to the 4th of July. This thing will dig down here and could get some severe weather chances for multiple days. Nothing too crazy. I don't know, maybe across this area. We'll have to just see. But this will be an interesting feature in the pattern as we get into next week. Big trough digs down across the Northeast, and this could provide a pretty nice summer cold front across the Northeast with some severe weather maybe before the cold front moves in. So this will be interesting to see. This could cool down also the entire eastern U.S., but I know you don't see, the blue colors down here or anything like that across the Southeast, but, this could probably bring some unsettled weather across the eastern U.S. just in general. So this doesn't always reflect everything at the surface, guys, but one thing you can look at in response to the blue area you saw on your screen, this is for a Monday after. Yeah, this is for Sunday afternoon. Let's go on and back it back up to that time frame here. Sunday afternoon right here. So if you notice, most our jet is basically going like this, okay, and then it kind of goes back up like that. So you see there's a little bit of a push south there. Well, you can see that pretty well if you look at the flow at the mid to upper levels, about 18,000 feet up. And I put my cursor over here. You got enhanced flow kind of just riding up here. All of our main flow aloft kinematics, wind energy needed for a lot of push in the atmosphere for storms, is pretty much to the north, which is not unusual at all this time of the year. But you see the little dip right here. It's kind of dipping down. That is because of that low pressure developing, providing a dip in the jet stream. And as we start to get into Monday afternoon, there's more of a dramatic dip because of that low pressure that becomes more pronounced, as you can see on your screen here. More blue, more of a digging, more of an upper trough, stronger lower pressure. And then, of course, we get into our Tuesday. And you see it even more, a little bit of a kind of a more split flow look here, but we get into Tuesday on this frame also. And the reason it looks a little different is because we got kind of the flow down here and we got more of a flow up here too because of this other deepening low pressure up here in Canada. So, you know, you can see it. You can match it very well with the panels here. But this is what I'm talking about as we're getting into Wednesday. Stronger kinematics really get going next Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday across the Northeast. And this is because you see this is like next Thursday night into Friday. You see we got plenty of flow, and there's no point in getting all hung up on how much flow is here. This is a pretty deep digging trough across the Northeast. And you can see it pretty well right here. Swinging through. In response, a lot of flow. Digs south. The jet digs across the Northeast. This could bring unsettled weather across the Northeast. So, you know, we can look at the surface too. This is for Sunday. You can see the rounds of thunderstorms in this area and just the pulse thunderstorms south of this. And then we start to get into Monday. Just shows a lot of thunderstorm activity across the eastern U.S. And then we get into Tuesday, a lot of thunderstorm activity again across the eastern and southern U.S. I think it'll just be a typical summer type week next week. And I think the daily afternoon showers and storms will probably keep the temperatures at bay, nothing too crazy. Then we get all the way into our Thursday. And then here is our 4th of July evening. Doesn't show much being generated off that trough, but that could change. So that's kind of a long range update. I do want to mention the tropics. There is a 20% chance of an area of unsettled weather in the Western Caribbean to develop in the Bay of Campeche, maybe over the next 7 days. And you're going to hear me say the Bay of Campeche a lot. Some people say the Bay of Campeche. It's funny, over the last couple of hurricane seasons, there's not been arguments, but discussions in the comments on how to say it. And it's just one of those things where I think people say differently. But anyways, there is a very low chance of something developing here. And this is not an unusual area at all for things to get going here in early hurricane season. But we are watching this. And if we look at the radar, the satellite here, you see the big blow up in convection. You see kind of the whiter colors here. This indicates, as you can tell right here, colder cloud tops. Which means that this convection is really exploding high up in the atmosphere. And the higher up you get, the colder it gets. So this is indicated by these colder cloud tops here. So we'll just watch this area and see if it'll drift into the bay here and try to develop into something. And sometimes models do not pick up on this well. But outside of that, guys, there is a little bit of a talk. I saw, I think it was AccuWeather post about this, and, you know, I could see it. I want to watch around the 4th of July, maybe a few days after. Some energy might get kind of thrown down across the south and get bogged down here in the Gulf here. And if you look right here, you see this kind of yellow, orange, red area. That's some mid-upper level energy. And this could get going. You can see as I kind of put this in motion into July 3rd, July 4th, it kind of gets tossed into Florida. And then it kind of goes back over the Gulf. And it could develop into something. It's just something to watch. It's a time of the year where if you do get kind of some cold fronts that are diving down across the eastern U.S., some energy could get trapped off the coast of the southeast or maybe in the Gulf, and then sometimes can develop into something. But we're watching this. It's just you can see a little piece of energy just sort of dancing around. You switch this to the lower levels, and you can't really see it at all. So, but that's all I got. Just want to give you some love on the tropics. I haven't talked about it much, but there just hasn't been a whole lot going on. So let's create a timestamp here and do our Bible devotion. Pretty good on time, so that's good. But this morning we're back in Romans. So it's Romans chapter 12, verse 12. Romans chapter 12, verse 12. And it says, let me find it here. I should have marked it, but I didn't. Shame on me. Rejoice in hope, be patient in affliction, be persistent in prayer. And I'll say it again. Rejoice in hope, be patient in affliction, be persistent in prayer. And I wrote down a couple things, and I just said, stay positive, knowing God will deliver you through the situation. Just stay positive. And that's not easy. I get it. Trust me. And we're going to hit on a couple things here. But maintain and stay consistent during tough times, and trust God's plan. And pray often. So, as I said, 3 different things, which hits on the 3 different things said in Scripture there, which is rejoice in hope. And I said, stay positive, knowing God will deliver. Be patient in affliction. Maintain and stay consistent in your walk during those tough times. And the last thing it says is, and of course your Bible might say something different, depending on what version you have, but be persistent in prayer. And I just said, pray often. So you might hear my dog in the background, might interrupt this devotion a little bit, but he wants to really come in here. But, just to kind of sum all that up, guys, but I had to stop the video there because my dog was going absolutely crazy on the other side of the door. But just to round this off, got kind of off track there. But, when you're going through tough times, guys, just try to remain consistent. Stay steady, stay on track, stay just as much on track through the tough times than that you're on track with during the good times. So just remain steady, and that's something that I have really personally strived to do, because I think I've said this a few weeks back. What I try to do is I try to envision myself and how I feel about a week after how I'm feeling right now, and how I feel, and knowing that probably in a week's time, I'm not going to have any worry, anxiety, whatever negative emotion about whatever I'm going through currently. It's not going to be there in a week. And what I'm going to do a week from that moment is I'm going to look back at that and I'm going to say, wow, why did I let that certain situation, the blows in life, because they're going to come, they're inevitable, right? Why did I let that certain situation make me feel the way I felt? It put me in a bad mood. It made me snap a little bit at somebody, maybe at work, or maybe it made me not have as much patience with my kids. Whatever it may be. We've all dealt with that before, but what I try to do is envision myself past the problem already, because, God remains faithful. He remains consistent with you. So why can't you remain consistent for Him, even during those tough times? And that kind of leads me into prayer. Never stop praying. Obviously a lot of people pray even more during the tough times, but there's also people that stop praying because they think it's not working. Stay consistent with prayer. So I guess what I gather from that area, from Romans 12:12 is consistency. And maybe that's not exactly what you're supposed to pull out of it, but I think you can pull that out of it, right? Just stay consistent and continue to, of course, if you're not doing good and you're struggling, you're having a hard time, and you don't want to consistently stay negative, but you get what I'm saying. If you're on a roll, right, and life knocks you upside the head, don't let it derail all that positivity that you had going prior. Stay positive. And I'm telling you, I am speaking heavily to myself here, So God bless all y'all. Stay consistent, stay awesome. You guys have an awesome and blessed into your week, and have a great start to your weekend. We'll talk soon.